Donald Trump's presidency is clearly on the decline, and more Republicans are beginning to distance themselves from him, and rightly so. They are recognizing that Trump's unpopularity could drag the entire party down. Lindsey Graham once warned that nominating Trump could spell disaster for the Republican Party, and that warning is coming true. Tonight, it's ironic to see Graham criticizing Trump after the former president made threats against Democratic members of Congress. Trump is clearly unsettled, and we're going to break it all down. But before we do, please leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It really helps support our work. Now, before we look at Lindsey Graham's comments, let's start with a Democratic senator who called out these attacks. Senator Chris Murphy.
The President of the United States just called for Democratic members of Congress to be executed. This is not normal. We cannot allow this to feel normal. This, as far as I know, has never happened before in the history of the country. Every Democratic member of the Senate and the House, their life is in jeopardy right now, especially those that were specifically targeted by this social media post. Democratic senators and House members who were simply saying that no member of the military should act illegally or in violation of the Constitution. The President of the United States just called for members of Congress to be executed. If you are a person of influence in this country, maybe it's time to pick a fucking side. If you are a Republican in Congress, if you are a Republican governor, maybe it's time to draw a line in the sand and say that under no circumstances should the President of the United States be calling on his political opposition to be hanged. We are at a very dangerous moment right now. The President is engaged in the wholesale incitement, endorsement, and rationalization of political violence in this country. This is a very slippery slope that we are on. This is a moment for people to step up, for Republicans to step up, for business leaders to step up. Anybody who has a voice or a soapbox in this country needs to draw a line in the sand and say that it is not acceptable for the President of the United States to call on the murder of his political opposition.
Today, I couldn't stop thinking about all the lectures we've had to endure from the right, from Republicans and MAGA, about Charlie Kirk and how they claim that our rhetoric and behavior somehow contributed to political violence. They suggested that any threats or assassination attempts against Donald Trump carried out by registered Republicans who supported him were somehow our fault or Barack Obama's fault. That has always been nonsense. But today, it felt even more outrageous because I saw only a handful of Republicans condemn Trump for his explicit calls for political violence. And with Trump, this isn't just vague or hypothetical. He frames it as a life or death scenario, telling his followers that they must act to save the country. He's already encouraged his base to engage in political violence on his behalf, promising them immunity if they do. And it's not just his supporters, it extends to his administration as well, which is exactly what Democratic Congressman Chris Deluzio, who has been targeted by Trump, pointed out today.
Do you expect to be investigated by the Department of Justice? I mean, we have obviously seen this Department of Justice respond very quickly to missives from the president or public, postings from the president to Pam. This should be looked into.
The fact that you even have to ask that question should put fear in the hearts of patriotic Americans that
the fact that we are living in a country where Democratic members of Congress think that they might be prosecuted by Donald Trump's Department of Justice for telling our service members to not follow illegal orders. What is even happening? Pam Bondi spent all of yesterday saying that she was going to follow the law when it came to the Epstein files. Clearly, but now she's going to be prosecuting Democratic members of Congress for telling our men and women in the military to follow the law. So, which is it, Pam? Do you want people to follow the law or not? Because clearly, it just seems like you want them to follow whatever Donald Trump says the law is. But Republicans, at least some of them, will not get on board with that. And they are actually speaking out for once. And, surprisingly, Lindsey Graham was one of them. GOP senators chastised Trump over execution threat against colleagues. Several Republican senators are chastising Donald Trump over his call to execute political enemies, even as the wider party appears content to shrug off the president's death threats. Trump, 79, flew off the handle in a series of unhinged Truth Social posts in which he wrote seditious behavior punishable by death. The president, of course, said in his True Social post, moments after designating Democrats saying that troops should not follow illegal orders, traitors. He also, of course, reposted one of his supporters saying, hang them. George Washington would. Republican Senator Rand Paul raised alarms over Trump's extreme language, arguing that such rhetoric all but invites violence from those inclined to take it literally. That kind of rhetoric isn't good, and it stirs up people among us who may not be stable, who may think, well, traitors, what do we do with traitors? It's the death penalty. Maybe I'll just take matters into my own hands, which is not something we should be encouraging. The Kentucky senator, one of the few in his party to regularly challenge Trump, argued, I think we have political disagreements, and we need to work them out in a political way. Meanwhile, North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis called Trump's death threats against the Democrats, all of whom are veterans, a little strong, according to Huffington Post. But it wasn't just those two, because South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham called Trump's post over the top. Lindsey Graham, for once in his life, said that what the president said he doesn't agree with. So Lindsey Graham is finally speaking out against Donald Trump, and all it took was death threats. It's encouraging to see some kind of breaking point among MAGA, but they should view this as an opportunity to save themselves. This is clearly what Republicans felt compelled to do regarding the Epstein files. I'll say it again. Marjorie Taylor Greene did not suddenly have a change of heart. Let's be serious. Where was her statement? I'll read it to you. This was her statement today after Trump called for Democrats to be executed. She said we shouldn't participate in political violence anymore and that it's time to tone down the rhetoric. But of course, that's not a real shift. Greene hasn't undergone a moral awakening or had some epiphany. It wasn't a Christmas ghost moment. She was taking advantage of a political moment, plain and simple, which is why I refuse to give her credit. What she has recognized is where the situation is headed. Any Republican with political sense should follow her lead in abandoning Trump because the losses are mounting. And soon they could land on your desk if you don't jump ship. I'm not just saying this for entertainment, though I admit I am excited to watch the chaos, but because it's the reality. Chris Hayes broke it all down, walking through the MAGA losses, and you'll want to see it all.
Even so, it is very clear when you put all the polling together, the Democrats right now are the ones with political momentum. That's evidenced by the off-cycle elections earlier this month, the first real test we had of all of this, when Democrats flipped the governor's mansion and the state legislature in Virginia, opening up a supermajority there. They became the first party in decades to hold New Jersey's gubernatorial mansion for 3 straight terms, to say nothing of the fact the 34-year-old Democratic Socialist beat both a Republican and a Trump-endorsed independent candidate to become the mayor-elect of the biggest city in the country. In fact, Republicans are so concerned about the midterms, Donald Trump ordered red states to rig their congressional maps, believing that extremely rare mid-cycle redistricting would be his salvation, right? The way to make sure that Republicans face no consequences with actual voters next year. But even in that case, Trump cannot get it over the finish line. Despite bullying and browbeating state legislatures with visits to the White House, personal entreaties by Vice President J.D. Vance, state legislatures under complete Republican control like Indiana and Kansas, to name 2, have refused to go along with this scheme, at least so far. They have told Trump no, they will not do his bidding. Even Texas, which of course did go along with the plan, had its new district struck down by a federal judge this week. Meanwhile, in Deep Blue, California, voters overwhelmingly approved a referendum to draw new maps of their own in order to level the playing field, which means, somewhat comically, at the end of the day, if the Texas map stays struck down, it's entirely possible Democrats end up being the ones benefiting from the whole fight. And then look at what happened in Congress this week, if you're not convinced. Republicans got rolled. They completely caved across both chambers. I mean, only one single Republican voted against the bill to release the Epstein files. That is despite, let's not forget, an enormous, months-long pressure campaign from Donald Trump in the White House to block and kill this bill. Trump lost so completely, so thoroughly, he had no choice but to himself sign a bill he hated and opposed behind closed doors. Now, of course, the concern is what exactly Trump might do to distract the country from his losses.
These people are losers. It's a movement of losers, and Donald Trump has become the biggest loser of all. We're going to keep talking about it, celebrating it, and using it as a wedge between him and MAGA every single day on this show. And we'll enjoy it more and more as their collapse continues. To support this work, hit the subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you've stayed until the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I will see you soon.